Hi, everyone. I'm back. I'm sorry it's been such a long time, but things have been really busy when you're even not allowed to leave your house. So I'm really sorry I haven't been reading to you, but I am back. We're on chapter 6. And when we last left the children and the castle, some of the other kingdoms nearby have come by to see what kind of trouble they can stir up. Do you remember the kingdom of Grath and also the kingdom of Vervine? So they are trying to be sneaky and see now that the king and the queen are presumably dead if they can take over the kingdom. And they're coming to stay at the castle for the memorial services. And the children know that the castle is going to have a little fun with them. So they're very much looking forward to that. So, after too long of a break, Tuesdays at the Castle by Jessica Day George, Chapter 6. But the castle didn't do anything to show its temper over the next few days. The next morning, when Celia woke, they found exactly enough guest rooms, barracks, and stables to house precisely the number of foreign guests they were expecting. No one saw it happen, and the rooms were so perfectly normal, the stalls and barracks so perfectly plain and even worn looking, that Celie herself had trouble believing that they hadn't been there all along. It was a theory of her older brother Bran's that the rooms really were there all the time. They just couldn't see them, or they were being kept in some sort of magic pocket, although Celie had never quite understood this explanation. Because the new rooms that Castle would produce from time to time were never that new, but appeared to be the same age as the other rooms, just a little disused. When the hallways grew, the stone flags were always worn in the middle. The walls had occasional chips or marks on them. Even the tapestries appeared to be part of the same series. It's probably one vast structure. It might even be the size of the entire valley, Bran would say, waving his arms, but we can only see a part of it. Or it tucks the unused rooms and bits of corridor away until it wants them in an enchanted pocket. Or it hides them on another plane of existence. This was one of the reasons that Bran had gone to the College of Wizardry. He was always saying things like this, or he used to. Celie sighed heavily as she made her way to the kitchens. She was taking the regular corridor and not jumping out a window because she had on her new gown, and Lila had threatened to stuff her up a chimney with her own two hands if Celie got it dirty, as though she would go climbing out of windows or visit the stables or explore a dusty attic today. It was the day of their parents' and Bran's memorial service, and everyone was in a somber mood, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Celie wasn't in the mood to do anything that might get her dirty, and Lila knew it, but she said it anyway because she was upset. And because she was upset too, and because she knew Lila hadn't meant it to be mean, Celie didn't protest or complain. Sergeant Avery had returned from his search 2 days before, his face set in grim lines. He had found the torn remains of Queen Selina's traveling gown and her ruby-studded wedding band in the thicket at the side of the road. He hadn't wanted to speak further in front of Celie, but Rolfe had gruffly insisted that he continue. There had been signs of further struggle and blood stains on the hard packed dirt on the side of the road. The soldier had reported as he handed Lila their mother's ring. Bodies had been found, but he couldn't say whom they belonged to, though he was reluctantly convinced that they were those of King Glower and Bran. Celie didn't remember anything else. She had woken up in her bed this morning with a dull headache to find Lila in full frenzy and the memorial service for those killed in the ambush converted into a state funeral for King Glower the 79th, Queen Selina, and Prince Bran, their family. Lila seemed braced for Celie to make a fuss, but instead Celie had quietly put on her new black gown, which felt very stiff and grown up with a royal purple sash, and did all the errands that Lila sent her to do as quickly as she could without running. She checked with the housekeeper that the newly added rooms had linens and basins and chamber pots and everything else the guests would need. She sent a footman to the stables and barracks and took his report back to Lila. Now she was on her way to the kitchens to make sure that Cook had everything she needed for the feast that night. In Slane, funerals were always held at sundown, with a feast afterward that would sometimes went on till dawn. So many of the guests had not yet arrived. It was only noon after all, and there was plenty of time for the various princes and their entourages to arrive, settle in, and change before the ceremony. "Good afternoon, Princess Cecilia," said a very subdued undercook as she entered the enormous kitchen. The rest of the staff echoed his greeting, a ripple of quiet preceding her across the room as she made her way to the far end, where Cook was overseeing the roasting of a huge pig in the largest fireplace. A motherly woman nearly as broad as she was tall, Cook just nodded as she ladled some sort of sauce over the sizzling meat. The sauce smelled like oranges, and Celie's mouth watered in spite of her resolution to behave with decorum. She had planned on eating lunch in the kitchen after she spoke to Cook, but if everyone was going to stare at her like this, perhaps she should take a tray somewhere else. The roasting pig, thoroughly basted, Cook admonished the spit boy to keep his cranking slow and steady and turned to Celie. "Princess," she said. "Cook," Celie replied. They smiled palely at each other. A message? Indeed. Celie took a note out of her sleeve, not the least bit put off by Cook's short, clipped words. She always spoke this way, and it was never a sign of ill temper or impatience. Rolf speculated that her head was so full of recipes and cooking times and remembering when she had put the potatoes on to boil that there was no room for fancy speech. Celie didn't mind. There was no finer cook in all of Slane and perhaps the whole world. Celie looked at her list of questions. "Do you have everything you need for the feast?" "Yes." "Do you have the numbers of people who are expected to attend?" "Yes." "We expect to have 100 guests staying with us for the next week after the service." "Fine." "Prince Lulaf of Graff does not eat meat," Celie went on. "Do we have a variety of non-meat dishes we can offer him?" "Of course." "Also, Prince Lulaf's dogs require their meat to be lightly grilled." "No." "Beg pardon?" "I don't deal with dogs," Cook said, her voice as impassioned as Celie had ever heard it. "I cook for people, not dogs. Talk to the kennel master." "But they're not hunting hounds," Celie protested. "His Highness has 3 small—" "Princess," Cook interrupted, "stand up straight." Celie stood up straight. "Princess Delilah sent you to ask questions that we all know the answers to because she is grieving. But this is enough. When Prince Lulaf comes with his herd of lapdogs, one of you must look him in the eye and tell him to take them to the kennel." "But it," Celie protested, "befouling Castle Glower with hair and dirt and soil from those little yappers, and during a time of mourning, too." Huh! Celie was rather fond of small dogs, or dogs of any kind, but she had to admit that the prince's demands seemed rather pushy, especially since he had invited himself to the ceremony. Rolf and Lila were still worried that the Graffians would try to take over the castle, and the list of necessities that had been sent ahead of the princess' traveling party seemed to confirm their fears. He was requiring that he and his men be put in the best possible quarters and for the indeterminate length of time. He had requested special foods brought to him and his servants and dogs, a tailor on hand to help him if he needed to alter his clothes or order new ones, a carpenter in case his rooms were not to his liking, and a private study large enough for him to meet with his ambassador and other confidants as often as necessary. Princess Cecilia? Celie folded the paper and put it in her sleeve again. I'll do it, she told Cook, and I'll let Lila know that you've got everything ready in the kitchen, like I knew you would. Thank you, Princess, Cook said. The big woman turned to one of the kitchen maids. Lunch on a tray, she barked, for Prince Ralph and Princess Delilah as well. Oh, and Pogue, Celie put in. Pogue is helping Ralph. Cook raised her eyebrows, but merely said, Of course. I'll take the tray to Prince Ralph and Master Perry, one of the maids offered. She giggled and shared a look with her friend. You, Cook pointed to another maid who had been quietly ladling soup into 4 bowls, take the tray to Prince Ralph and Master Perry. You, she pointed to the giggling maid, Princess Cecilia and Princess Delilah. Now,